It's been 3 years since my last relationship. Being 27 and single is no laughing matter. The traumatic experiences of watching your friends get married, have children, and attain the American dream are akin to the hopeless depression of a schizophrenic mental patient. I wanted a wife. I wanted kids. I wanted a steady job. I was tired of working at Burger King and living alone in a studio apartment. And I was almost certain my computer was on its last leg, from all the viruses it had attained from the countless visits to porn sites nightly. Disgusted of the company of my own left hand, I decided to go out to one of those speed dating events. I picked out my best clothes and walked out the door. Keep in mind, I worked at a Burger King, so the best clothes I could afford were some mediocre dress shirts and tattered khaki pants I bought at Walmart. I walked into the event trying to display any shred of confidence I'd left. I was instantly discouraged when I saw the other competing males. They had Armani suits, high-class whiskey, and just reeked of nothing but pure self-esteem. The ladies had fine dresses, some of them cut quite low. They smelled of flowers, almost as if perfumes designed by Martha Stewart herself. There were some serious lookers in there, and after looking at some of them for a while, I felt the need to give old Lefty one more go. The speed dating started. The first girl I sat down with was quite young, a 22-year-old mother of 3. She had made a lot of mistakes in her life, and seemed far more than I could handle. Right off the bat, she told me how she was 4 days sober from meth, and was looking to settle with any decent-looking man. I spent the next 4 minutes making general small talk, quite literally fearing for my life. Once that buzzer sounded, I rocketed out of my chair with the speed of a gazelle. The young woman seemed a little offended, but honestly, what did she expect? The next woman was way too old for me. I thought these events had age limits. She had the presence of a creepy man at a Chuck E. Cheese, only it was me who was playing in the ball pit. My decision was finalized as soon as she brought up her grandkids. I can't handle one generation of young ones, let alone 2. I actually asked if she needed help getting out of her chair. She almost threatened me with her cane. Luckily, the buzzer sounded. Again, another dark look. I was batting 0 for 2, but such pitches were ones I would gladly let the catcher have. The next woman seemed much more appealing. She was 26 and studying to be a nurse at a local hospital. She loved kids, but had none of her own, which was a big relief to me. She seemed well kept and stable, and wasn't a bad looker either. No lie, my eyes did wander a bit south a couple of times during the meeting. She either didn't notice or didn't care, as she never pointed it out. I asked if she'd like my number as the session ended. She consented. I flipped open my phone and entered the numbers as she read it aloud, smiling at her and thanking her for the listening ear. I got up to the next table. While doing so, I closed my phone by accident and realized I didn't save the number. So it was lost forever. God damn it. 0 for 3. The next table was empty. What a joke. If I wanted to sit and stare at a wall, I would have stayed home. Nothing really to say here. Moving on. Well, this is where the story starts getting a little dark. The woman I met at the next table was the most interesting of all. Not in a bad way. She had long, dark, flowing hair and green eyes. She had this cute smile, and man, one hell of a body. Black dress, black shoes, black everything. For someone dressed in such a gothic manner, she had such a bubbly personality. Everything I said made her giggle. I felt like a king just talking to this girl. She was 27 and a professional poker player. I told her the only card game I ever played was Magic the Gathering. She just giggled and told me she was also a former state champion of Magic. My jaw dropped. After another minute of dumbfounded talk, she told me a bit more about herself and why she was at the event. She was married at one time, but he left her after their 2 children died of leukemia. She told me that the cancer was something that was with her family since the 18th century. The husband put the blame completely on her. Just crushed her. She said she cried for weeks, even had to move to a new city. Despite telling me her tragic tale, she didn't seem to wince once about it. Either she was incredibly optimistic about life, or she was one of the best actors I've ever seen. Either way, I was willing to take a shot. I asked if she'd like my number. It turned out she had some bad meetings at this particular place and wanted to take off and do something a little more fun. She tossed me an invite, and seeing as I'm a 27-year-old man with not much going on in his life, I didn't ask twice. We decided to go to a local casino just built a few months ago. Seeing as she's new to town, she wanted to check out what poker tournaments were offered. To her dismay, it turns out poker was not offered at this casino. But they did have blackjack, which she wasn't too fond of, seeing as it was just a game of luck more than skill compared to poker. Well, at least that's what she told me. To be honest, I was secretly happy because I had no idea how to play poker. And with blackjack, I could at least tell what's going on. Not saying I would play anyway, seeing as I'm, an employee at Burger King. We sat down at one of the higher limit tables. She pulled out this humongous wad of $100 bills from her purse, and then handed it to the dealer. The dealer then counted it out and yelled to the top of his lungs, "Changing 3,000!" and then pushed this humongous stack of $25 chips to her. For someone who said they didn't like the game, she certainly seemed to know what she was doing. She turned that $3,000 into $10,000 within an hour. Whenever she'd hit a big hand, she would tip the dealer and then buy me a beer. And, to my pleasure, she'd have to bend over to tip the dealer, flashing me a nice upskirt shot, showing me the only article of clothing on her that wasn't black. Whew. Hello, Kitty. Finally, she bet $5,000 on one single hand, the table max. She was dealt a 20. She looked at the dealer and said, "I'd like to double down, please." The dealer just stared back at her puzzled, saying, "Ma'am, you have 20, and ace is the only card in the deck that could not bust your hand." She then glanced back at me and said, "Care to make a side bet?" I gulped and slowly asked, "What was the wager?" She told me that she was so sure that an ace was coming out that she was willing to bet anything on it. Completely dumbfounded by the offer, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "I bet you a kiss." "Deal," she yelled as she pushed an additional $5,000 up to the original bet. "Wait," I said. "What do I have to wager?" She just winked at me and said, "I'll tell you after I win." The dealer then patted the table, said, "Good luck, ma'am," drew the card to reveal an ace of spades, giving her 21. The dealer busted too, just for good measure, and everyone was just dumbfounded, like they couldn't believe that such a ridiculous wager was made. She then turned to me with a Cheshire-like cat grin. My blood went cold as to think of just what I lost in this gamble I made. She walked up to me and giggled, looked me in the eyes and said, "Pay up," and then kissed me. We cashed out her chips and left after that. She said she had some errands to run at home, and being new to the neighborhood and everything, that was understandable. I agreed since I had a Facebook application that I had to update. Obviously, that was not the reason I gave her. I mean, sweet Jesus, what's wrong with me, passing up this amazing girl for Facebook? So we exchanged numbers and parted ways. I couldn't believe it. I actually scored a beautiful woman. Hell yeah! Weeks passed on and went into months. We continued to talk and eventually began regularly dating. The relationship moved pretty quickly, and it seems we were truly a match for each other. After about 7 months of dating, I popped the question and asked her to marry me. I did it on the 21st, seeing as that was the hand she made in blackjack which led to our first kiss. She found that so romantic and flew into my arms, and screamed to the skies, yes. It was like finally things were looking up in my life. I moved out of my shitbox apartment and into her home. I always admired the cozy feel of her 2-bedroom ranch home. Something perfect, to start a little family in. As I finished moving all my stuff, I noticed I had a lot of boxes and was making quite the mess. I offered to move everything into the basement. She quickly, had this look of concern on her face and said, No, I'll take care of it, honey, don't worry. I never understood that. She always had this phobia of the basement. I guess with the things that did happen to her life, she'd have some illnesses or mental disturbances that would lead up to it. I never pushed the issue, though. The next few months were great. We never got tired of each other. We even flew down to Vegas for our wedding. It was so special. The ceremony, her dress, the kiss. It was almost as if it was written from a storybook. I'm going to leave the details of our honeymoon out because, seeing as this is not a pornographic piece, it was literally perfect. It was like I couldn't write a better way for my life to go. The only fault was that damn basement. She would never let me near it. Be it she did have a much troubled life before she met me, so I couldn't, argue with it much, seeing as everything else was just perfect. One day she told me she had a big poker game to go to, which was kind of her code saying I had the house to myself for the rest of the day. She smiled, kissed me on the cheek, and left. Now, after I left Burger King, I got myself a new job dealing blackjack at that casino we had our first date at. And as part of working there, I had to report to the state how much I made every single week in tips. To my horror, the computer crashed 15 minutes after she left. If I didn't get these reports done, I was going to be fired, if not arrested for fraud. Instantly, I called my wife, asking if she had another computer or something I could use. She didn't answer. I really wasn't surprised because she always turned her phone off for big games. So then I began my epic quest through the house to find something I could send this email on, but to no avail. Desperate times called for desperate measures. It was time to finally explore that basement. So I took the daring risk. I walked over to the door, grabbed the handle. It was so cold and chilling. I turned it and it was locked. Great. Frustrated and defeated, I just slumped on the couch, staring at the wall, thinking about how I'm going to explain this to her when she comes back, and even thinking about spending time in jail. It was then I noticed a silly little flower pot. It was really odd because she never replanted that flower or anything, but it always stayed the same. It wasn't a fake flower, it was a real flower. The pot was decorated with certain gambling symbols like hearts and diamonds and clubs. So, I sucked it up and said, what I got to lose? Took a gamble and searched in that flower pot. And jackpot, I found a key. Son of a bitch. I sprinted to the basement door, slammed the key in, and just almost ripped the door off its hinges getting down there. And then I was met with the most rancid odor. It attacked me as if like a falling wall from a decrepit building. The entire basement looked as if it was wasting away, a clear contrast to the rest of the house. The heavy layers of dust upon every surface suggested that the basement hadn't been accessed for years. Using my cell phone was the only source of light I had. I guided myself down the stairs and flicked the light switch. Surprisingly, the bulb still worked. The walls looked molded. The wood was breaking down. The stench was putrid. The entire place was in disarray. I encountered a strong sense of dysphoria after setting foot in this room. So I searched as quickly as possible as to find anything I could possibly use to help me in my quest. To my luck and astonishment, there was an old laptop and a charger in the corner, hidden under some boxes and books. Oddly enough, one of them was one of the boxes I came with when I moved out. Quickly, I grabbed the items and ran back upstairs to the master bedroom. After giving the laptop a few minutes of power, I booted it up. It ran on Windows XP and was quite the technological dinosaur compared to modern equipment. But it had Microsoft Office, so it was acceptable. As soon as Windows finished booting up, a system message appeared on the screen to notify me that new sources had been added to a tagged video, and if I'd like to check it out. I'd never seen a system message like this before. I know that snooping is generally taboo, but curiosity overcame me. The video was extremely shaky and grainy. I could barely make out the figure of a man tied to a chair with some sort of metallic rope. A woman moving as if she was floating on air, not moving a single bone in her body, yet being able to slowly hover around the room came into the picture. To my horror, she brought out a knife and started slowly cutting the man. The man screamed in brutal pain as the woman slowly cut him into pieces. Blood poured from his mouth and all his lacerations as the woman dug the knife deeper in. His clothing was slowly stripped from his body, and after each article was removed, she used a lighter to set all of his newly exposed hairs on fire. Covered in horrific burns and terrible cuts, the man stopped screaming and was now bawling in tears. Occasionally he would scream out why. I guess that's all he could muster to say. Each time he did, though, the woman would stab him again. She began laughing as the man began vomiting blood and entrails. She picked up a solid piece of the vomit with the knife and slowly licked the knife clean, giggling like a schoolgirl. She then proceeded to gouge the man's left eye out while he was still alive. I couldn't watch anymore. I closed the video. Shaken and horrified, I clicked on Queen AVI. I had to know what was going on. This time it was a young girl about 8 years old, bound to the chair. She looked confused and innocent. I just shook my head and fell into tears. Such a thing was not about to befall this child, was it? The video was of the same quality of the last one. However, the background was much brighter. They seemed to be in an abandoned household, falling apart in ruin. The woman floated over to the girl, much like she did in the last video, and kissed her gently on the cheek. She slowly brought out heat lamps, the source of the brightness mentioned before. One by one, until the entire video was white. After a while, the camera was dimmed so that the girl could be seen again. The innocent look once seen in the beginning of the video turned to one of excruciating pain. The heat lamps slowly began burning her clothes and skin. Bubbles and blisters began rapidly forming on her skin as well, as, just like in the last video, she screamed "why?" and was punished each time by brutally being lashed with a belt with glass glued to it. The blisters began to boil as the child was roasted alive. Eventually the screaming stopped, and the girl fell into seizures. At this point, the same giggling in the last video could be heard again, this time even louder. She then took a knife and carved "missed abortion" into the child's torso. Eventually, the girl stopped moving. I closed out at that point. I needed to see the next one. I had to witness this. This had to be stopped. With such determination, I clicked on Jack AVI. This time, there was no one strapped to a chair. Instead, an infant car seat was in the chair, with what seemed to be a newborn infant tightly strapped inside. Like the previous videos, the woman floated over to the child. She rubbed its head and briefly went off camera. She came back with a teddy bear and started to tease the child with it, just keeping it out of the child's reach. She finally shoved the stuffed animal into the child, which made the baby screech in terror. Then from the back of the teddy bear, she pulled out a bloody pair of scissors. She grabbed the baby's hand and slowly began cutting off each and every one of its fingers, and then proceeded to do the same thing with the other hand, and even went down to the toes. As soon as she hit the toes, though, she started whispering, "This little piggy had roast beef. This little piggy had none." Then, when it seemed like the baby's cries were coming to their climax, she positioned the scissors in front of the baby's face and split them apart and lined them perfectly up with the baby's eyes. She started to giggle and then slowly shoved the scissors into the baby's eyes all the way to the back of its skull. Shaking, I forced myself to click on Ace AVI. Before the video played, I noticed that this file was modified within the last hour. Almost blinded by fear, I swallowed my oppression and opened my eyes. This time, there was just the woman. No other person present. She was facing away from the camera and speaking in a dynamic tone. I can't recall exactly, but here's a paraphrased transcript of what she said. "Hello. Clearly, by now you know that I'm not the person you thought I was. I'm sick and twisted. I love this. It makes me so happy to see somebody's life leave their body, especially when it's at my hand. I know you're watching this, and I know you're terrified. The ghosts of the people that I've slain in the past are swarming around you right now, telling you to pull away from the screen and save yourself. Yet still you sit here and watch, waiting for some happy ending or reasonable explanation as to why these events happened that you just witnessed. There are no special effects here. What you saw was real. I love watching this footage. I think about it to help get me off while you did your feeble attempts to fuck me with that limp dick of yours. I had to hide this. You couldn't know. Your worthless brain would tell you to turn me in. You were so desperate for love, and you fell in love with a witch." The woman turned around and I instantly recognized the face of my wife. I couldn't feel emotion at this point. I didn't know what to think. My memory had fallen to pieces. I didn't know where I was or who I had been or what I was about to go through. Everything in my life died as I saw the once happy, bubbly eyes that I once saw in my life become vapid and emotionless. The smile crept across her face, one that makes me quiver in malice upon the slightest thought of it. This wasn't possession. This was mental illness. This was just evil. So evil. She continued, "It's quite a shame, really. I really loved you. You were a broken, little toy that I could fix. Remember the giggle? I made you fall in love with me. I tricked you. I lied to you. And you want to know the best part? I knew you would find out. I couldn't keep this secret forever. Eventually you'd find the key to the basement. Eventually the stench would become too strong. Eventually the decaying foundation would begin to topple the house. And eventually you'd realize that my children never had leukemia and my husband never left me. I killed them. And they're closer than you think. Why do you think the basement smells so bad? You'd be surprised how easy it is to cement human remains in the floor. You stepped on my dead children and husband. Feel proud of yourself? I know you're watching this video. I just made this video. I know what you've done. I began shaking my head, fearing that what I was about to hear. A cold sweat crept upon me as I suddenly felt two eyes bore into the back of my head. I was paralyzed. Those noises aren't pipes you're hearing. Turn around. I slowly turned and froze as I met the psychopathic eyes of my wife. She began to giggle. I don't know what happened after that. The police report said that people heard screams coming from the house during my attempted murder and called the local authorities. I was told by my physicians that I was tied to a chair, the same one used in the previous videos, and was videotaped. She apparently took a jagged Ace of Spades card and tried to cut my penis in half from the pee hole down. All the videos are now in police custody, and I refuse to watch mine. My wife was given the death penalty. I was present at the execution. Her last words were to tell me that she was not human, and that she had been around since the 18th century. She's been doing this since then, and it just wasn't recently until Modern Marvels that she was able to go back and view what she called her masterpieces. She also told me she was using black magic to help keep her look young, and also to help her win any gamble she ever made. She then reminded me of the bet we made on our first date. She told me what I really wagered was my soul, and that losing the bet made it so that she could come back constantly as long as I was still breathing. She survived the first 3 attempts at lethal injection, but died on the 4th. She was smiling and giggling like a little schoolgirl right before she died. I've been through 12 different therapists, years of shock treatment, and I was finally able to return to reality at the age of 32. With the money I inherited from her death, I was actually able to become part owner of the casino. I currently make millions of dollars a year and have a really good network of friends. And my life has been incredible. I feel accomplished and successful, something I never felt before. And now I'm so confident. In fact, I'm going on a date tonight with a girl. She's cute too. She plays blackjack, but says she loves to play poker. She has dark, long flowing hair and vibrant green eyes.